So we're back. Well, you are. No, let's not start that again. We're back in Ezra. Do you remember last week, Belshazzar, king of Babylon, having a huge party, mocking God by drinking toasts with all the special gold and silver that was stolen when God's temple was destroyed? And then suddenly there was that floating hand writing on the wall. Remember all that? Because right there, in midair, a hand appeared and started writing on the wall. It was all very Matilda. That's right. And then it ended with God's people being allowed to return home and start to rebuild the temple. So, where did they start? Well, where do you start when you build a temple? Let's find out. Building a temple? Where do you start building a temple? Well, how about the doors so you can get in? There we are. No, wait. What are you going to attach them to? And what about if it rains? Maybe start somewhere else. That's better. The roof will keep the rain off. But what's going to hold the roof up? The walls. That's a good idea. Where are you going to put them? No. No. Do you know what? I'm not sure they're ever going to get there. So I'll tell you, where do you start when you're building a temple? You start with the foundations. And that's where God's people started. But even before they laid the physical foundation stones, they built the spiritual foundations. Now, that doesn't mean imaginary foundations made of clouds and dreams. No, the spiritual foundation, they made sure they were right with God. Now, there were still lots of people around who didn't want them there, who didn't want them to be building the temple, but they knew they had to carry on anyway, building the spiritual foundations. And so this is what they did. So, even though they were scared, they built an altar. And they got animals. And they sacrificed them. So, why did they do all of that? Well, the idea was that they knew they had hurt God and turned away from him. They knew that they had mucked up, and so they had to make themselves right with God. So they tried to swap with animals. They said, God, you should be angry at me rightly because I've done wrong. And so I'm going to sacrifice this animal as a way of showing you that I know I've done wrong. And the animal is going to take the blame for me. Now, we're talking about fairness at the moment in our assemblies. And of course, that's not very fair on the animal, is it? And also the problem was that they had to keep doing it because one animal could never forgive all of their sins. So that's why they built an altar. But what about us? Well, don't worry. We don't need to start reaching for a guinea pig because the difference between then and now is that there has been a sacrifice that was made once for all time so that no sacrifice is ever needed to be made again to let us be forgiven by God. Because instead of all those animals, Jesus said, I'll do it. I'll be the sacrifice on the cross so that everything you've ever done, past, present and future, that stops you being close to God can be forgiven once and for all. No more sacrifices needed. So now, guinea pigs are just for cuddling. Because Jesus is the way that we can be close with God. Let's think about that this week. And if you're watching in classrooms or somewhere else in school and you've got questions to ask, you can always ask your teacher to write them down and send them to me, and they may come up in the next videos. But until then, goodbye and God bless.